Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to another episode of Tackling Taboos, hosted by the Ethnic Diversity Network in Openreach. I'm your host, Stephen Adubafor. I'm a project manager.
Stephen, as he was saying, he's a project manager within FND, and he is representing EDN to do this Tackling Taboos podcast. And you've got myself on. So I'm Nuran. I also work in FND, and I'll soon be moving over to James Tappington's area. So very exciting times, James. And I am the co-chair of the Able To Network. So we've got our lovely guests on who are James, and we'll get James to do his introduction in a moment. We've also got Aisha Minhas, and we've also got Nina Frisbee, and we'll be talking about IVF, and it's going to be quite an open conversation. So we're gonna hear their stories, and we're also going to have questions from both Stephen and myself, and of course we'll open out to everybody else for some questions as well. So if I come to you first of all, James, if that's okay, if you could give us an introduction of yourself, that would be great.
Yeah, brilliant. So firstly, thank you very much for the intro. Looking forward to having you and the team as well. So it's only a few days away. But yes, I'm James Tappington, MD of Fibre First and Shared Services. So quite a big role running now half the Fibre Build programme, the kind of Fibre Cities build and the big urban build programme, along with a bunch of other things across the wider Fibre First programme, partner management, fleet, data, stores, equipment, materials. So quite a big role across the business.
Perfect. Thank you so much, James. So it must be quite difficult with a role so big, and then of course you've had quite a big journey in your personal life, which you've been quite open about, and you've shared many a time. So if you don't mind, would you share a little bit around your testicular cancer first of all, or however you see fit, actually,
Yeah,
James?
of course. So I'll maybe come to that one sort of halfway through, because I think it probably makes sense to start at the beginning. And I guess that the main topic we're here on today is sort of fertility and IVF and the challenges there. And I guess for me and Gemma, my other half, that started back in, how many years have we been together now? 15 years this year. Sort of 13 years ago, 14 years ago maybe, and it was really difficult for Gemma because we've been together maybe 6 months. Relatively early stage of a relationship, and she told me that she essentially had gone through the menopause when she was 17, and didn't have any eggs, and couldn't have her own children, can biologically have her own children. And that was really tough for her, right? Imagine putting yourself in that position where you're 6 months into a relationship with someone, it's all going quite well, and you think it's got the prospect to go somewhere, and then you've got to sort of pluck up the courage to say, look, I know you want a family, I want a family, but I'm going to really struggle to do that with you. So that was really hard. It was massively hard for her, and obviously quite a lot for me to try and process as well. But as you then sort of think through, it is possible to have children still. There's various routes. You can have fertility treatment with donor eggs, or you can adopt, or you can surrogacy and kind of other options that are available. And we spent then a lot of time sort of thinking about that, and it was probably back in 2016 we decided that the right route for us was with donor eggs, and we were very fortunate. We found a donor, got matched reasonably quickly, and even more fortunately, our very first ever attempt back in 2016 was successful. So we had, first go in, had our first son, Arthur, who's now 7, and it was amazing, and we sort of, probably were kind of lulled into a bit of a false sense of security because, the first go through the process and it just worked, and it was great, So that all was good for a couple of years, and we, enjoyed Arthur and enjoyed that sort of first experience. And then we thought, right, now it's time to go back and try for number 2. And then that's when it got much more difficult. So we had 3 embryos that we got from the first donor. Arthur was number 1. Number 2 and number 3 just didn't work. We had them put back in, and no positive pregnancy test. Then we had a bit of a break, and it was quite hard for Gemma to then process that if we did end up having a second child, they wouldn't be biologically completely the same as Arthur, because it would be from a different egg donor. Obviously, it would be biologically me for both, but it would now be from 2 different donors for 2 different children, which she really struggled with and found that quite hard. But then we did come back with another donor. We got 5 embryos from that donor, and we had various attempts, I think then between sort of 2019 and maybe late 2018, 2019, 2020, where we tried all 5, and I think from the 5 we had 2 more failures that just didn't work at all, and 3 miscarriages. And that really was quite difficult, because by that point we were on kind of attempt number 8 at the end of that, and it's just, wasn't really working, wasn't lots of things going wrong, and you get sort of sucked into the medical world then of, well, let's try this test or this procedure, or why don't you have this add-on to the process, and there's this special camera that can watch the embryo grow, and there's this special glue they can put in to make it stick better, and actually with hindsight, it's all ways of them making money rather than things that actually make any kind of real difference. But the sort of mental toll gets harder as you get through. Every single failure becomes a bit more difficult, and you start thinking, what am I doing wrong and what's not working? So then I think we'd had sort of 8 attempts by that point, and none of them had worked. Then mid 2020 I got testicular cancer, which was completely out of the blue. I mean, I remember it really well, actually. It was April, I think it was April 2020. We were just into the first lockdown in COVID. Found a lump, thought this doesn't feel quite right. Phoned up the GP, and obviously at the time we were in the middle of a pandemic, so it was all a bit weird. And phoned up the GP surgery and said, I'd like to make an appointment to see the doctor, please. And they said, well, we're doing everything by phone at the moment. I was like, I'm not quite sure that's going to work for this, but if that's the process. So got a phone call back from the doctor pretty quick, actually, within sort of 2 or 3 hours. And the doctor said, what can I help you with? So, well, I've got a lump on my testicle. She said, well, that's not going to work on the phone. You better come in. So yeah, I think same day I went in, and she's like, yeah, I can definitely feel something there. It's not quite right. Let me refer you. And then it was all pretty quick. There's the sort of 2-week wait process on the NHS if there's a suspected cancer diagnosis. And I was there within 10 days. Weirdest hospital experience ever. Normally when you go for a hospital appointment, there's a waiting room full of people, and you're sat there and they're running an hour behind, and it's all a bit of a nightmare. Turned up and the waiting room was empty, and the person sat right behind the reception desk was the consultant, because the receptionists were working from home because it was a pandemic. And the consultant said, are you Mr. Tappenden? I was like, yep. So I went in, and he's like, yeah, it's not quite right. And did an ultrasound, and yeah, we can definitely see something, but it's really quite small, and we're not certain what it is. So come back in 2 months and we'll have another look. So went back in 2 months, and they did another scan, and they measured it, and it had grown 1 millimeter in 2 months. And he said, well, we're still not quite sure what it is. We don't want to jump to a conclusion. So come back in another 2 months. So went back in another 2 months, and it had grown 2 millimeters. And at that point, they were like, look, it's not classical presentation of testicular cancer, but we want to take it out just in case. And I said, well, what do you mean take it out? Thinking that they meant the lump, and they don't mean the lump, they mean the whole testicle. That's what they do when they're because there's a bigger risk of, if they cut the lump out and they don't get all of it, that it can actually make it spread and all that kind of stuff. So there's obviously, as a man, a lot to sort of think through around that. Am I still completely a man now? I've only got one. How does that work? And sort of mentally, that puts a bit of strain on you. Then there's the question around, well, do you want a prosthetic one? Which lots of people opt for. I didn't. I thought that seemed slightly odd. But anyway, had the operation. They do the operation, and they can only actually confirm that it is cancer once they've taken it out. So they take it out, send it off to the lab, and they look at it in the lab and say, yes, it is. So I got the phone call a couple of weeks after the operation, say, yes, it is cancer. And then you get the interesting dilemma of, do you want any treatment? So, well, why is this a choice? Surely there's an obvious answer, and what you should be doing here. But there's not. Actually, the choice for me was, you could have some chemotherapy, and that reduces the chance of it coming back, or you can choose not to, and there's a slightly higher chance of it coming back. And what we do in that circumstance is just monitor you. You have regular blood tests, regular scans, and I went for that one. So most of the last 4 years now, I've been having sort of 6 monthly scans and 3 monthly blood tests to sort of keep on top of it. And touch wood, it hasn't come back, and still all clear to this day. But anyway, relating that back to the fertility story, obviously we're now in a position where we've got no ovaries, no eggs, and 1 testicle rather than 2. So it sort of made the challenge even bigger than it was. Fortunately, it didn't impact my fertility. There was still, usable sperm that was there from the remaining one. So we ended up with a third donor, where we got another 5 embryos. We had first attempt didn't work. Second attempt was another miscarriage. So we were then up to, I think, 11 or 12 attempts that just hadn't worked. And amazingly, last August, we had attempt number 13 and it worked. So we had our second child, Henry, back in March this year. He's now 3 and a bit months old. But it's been a hell of a journey to get there. 13 attempts in total, premature menopause at 17, 5 miscarriages, 6 failed attempts, testicular cancer, however many CT scans and MRI scans and blood tests and appointments, and it's hard. The hardest bit is the mental toll it puts on you. Worrying about your own mortality, worrying about, is it something you're doing wrong, worrying about the knock-on impact on your career and your family. And I think when I've spoken about the sort of process before, I took 3 months off work. I took a sabbatical. Clive and Kim at the time, my boss, was generously said, I sort of went to them and said, I'm kind of need some time out. Need some time out to just sort of get back to being me again. And took 3 months off, and that was a massive help for me. But yeah, it's that's the sort of relatively short version of my story, which has had lots of ups and downs, but here to tell the tale, and it's been hard, but we're now a family of 4.
Thank you for sharing, James. I hope I'm back as well. I hope people can hear and see me. I guess, and you covered quite a lot of aspects with the mental well-being and also the physical. I guess as a male in this process, how do you think that impacted your journey, and how do you think, again, any maybe words of advice or comments that you'd make for other males going through the IVF process, with their partners, and because the cancer aspect is a whole another column in itself, but I guess even related to IVF specifically, just the whole aspect of being a male in that process.
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, it was harder for Gemma, but where I really struggled was there were days when you wanted to be really supportive and put an arm around her and cry with her and sort of understand what it was you could do to help. And there were other days where you wanted to sort of give her a good shake and say, come on, get on with it. It's we'll be all right, we'll get through this. And sort of understanding how to kind of just manage those different days, because there were days that were fine and we were both completely functioning, and there were days that were not fine, and she'd be down or I'd be up, or I'd be up and she'd be down. And it's just I think you just got to listen to each other, understand when the other person needs space, understand when they really need you there, understand when you've got to be a bit tougher and try and get them back on their feet a bit, understand when you've got to be a bit softer and a bit more responsive. But there's no rule book on this. There's no you've just got to assess each day as it comes, understand we all know our partners better than anyone else. You got to understand what's right for them and how to respond and how to deal with what's in front of you. But it's really hard, because on many days you just feel completely helpless. What can you do? There's nothing I can do. I can't magic up a solution that's going to work here. And it's just controlling what you can control and being on top of the things that can make a difference, and then just responding to each day as it comes, really.
James, I've got a question as well, if I may. So you spoke really beautifully about Gemma and the struggles that she went through, and of course, like you said, it took its toll on you as well while you were going through it. If you were to give advice to somebody else that's going through it, how would you say a woman could support a man going through IVF? And equally, what would be the advice for a man to give his partner some support, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult to answer that, because everyone's experience with fertility treatment is going to be different. So in our case, and I don't mean this in a horrible way, it was medically, it was Gemma that was the problem. Medically, it wasn't me that was the problem, and that creates a certain imbalance in the sort of feelings, because she feels like it's her fault and it's her to blame. And you know, there's a risk that I can feel sort of angry and resentful because it's nothing wrong with me and it's your fault, and that creates one dynamic. In other situations, it's the male that's the problem. You know, it's don't have quality sperm or doesn't work, and there's nothing wrong with the female fertility. And in other situations, it's both that's the problem. And I think, you know, therefore it's quite hard to give an answer. I could give the answer that was specific to my situation because that's how it was for us. But I think it's being really sort of sympathetic to, you know, what each of those situations are and who needs what support and how to respond to it. And, you know, for us, you know, the support for me was my family and my friends and work, right? And I've got lots of relationships and really good relationships with colleagues that kind of helped me get through it. And it wasn't necessarily the sort of medical and practical side because that wasn't what I needed. Whereas for Gemma, it was much more on the kind of medical side in terms of both the physical interventions and drugs and all that kind of stuff, but also kind of more medical support around kind of mental health and mental well-being was you know, the route we went down there. But that's how it was for us because medically it was her that was the problem and me that wasn't. But in other situations it would be very different.
I'm really sorry. I've literally just joined, so sorry if I've missed quite a lot or this has already been covered. But I can't have children naturally. It's just a definite never going to happen. And IVF obviously is an option. But what I'm up against is my weight and the fact that the BMI chart, which I feel is so outdated and just ridiculous, is used. And I'm only 4'11". So on the BMI chart, they want me to be between 7 and 8 stone before they'll offer me IVF. And that's just really unrealistic for me. And it kind of feels like I have actually lost a fair bit of weight and I'm still being told, no, you're overweight. So I feel like I've come to a brick wall and I'm starting to try and process that this just isn't going to happen for me. And I was just wondering, is anybody else been on the same boat? Is there any other options that anybody could maybe help me explore without putting me into debt and danger?
So I can answer that question. When I went through my IVF journey, they said I was overweight. And they, even to get free funding for IVF, I still had to go and I still had to lose weight. But I think for me was back then I was quite young, and I think it was a determination that if I needed to get this done, I have to do whatever I can to lose that weight. Although it's really difficult to try and get yourself into the mindset because you want a baby, but they won't do it. And actually, to be fair, what they had done was they had done some blood tests on me and actually said that a count of sort of having a high risk of miscarriage was showing in my blood. And that was the reason why they said I had to lose weight. So otherwise, you know, if we do IVF, the chances are that it's not going to be successful. And actually, my story, when I do talk about it, I did have 2 miscarriages in my journey, and I had to drop the weight. But I guess what I would say is that I wouldn't rule it out that it's never going to happen for you. I think it's more about, it's just a sort of mindset. You just have to get yourself into a certain mindset of that it will happen, but what are the steps that are going to take me to get there is how I had to work through it. But I was grateful that I had a partner that was really supportive in this process as well. Mm-hmm. So I would never say it's never going to happen. I know it's easy said than done because I went through that phase of like, this is never going to happen for us, but it can, but it just might take time, I think is probably what I'm saying.
I think for me as well, I'm getting on a wee bit now, and obviously men are okay, it doesn't matter what age they are, but for a woman we also have that hurdle of the older we get, the less likely you are to be successful. And I'm in my mid-30s now. I know I don't look it from a photo, I know.
The other thing, Sarah, I'd suggest is 2 things. One is get a second opinion. You know, ask if you can go back and see another doctor.
James, I've had so many second opinions. I've had so many different gynecologists, and I've been to 3 separate fertility clinics. Yeah. Sorry, I'm not trying to be negative. I'm genuinely just like, I don't know what to do at this point because I'm never going to be 7 stone. You know, that's just absurd to me.
Do you want to
And
reach out to me separately, and I can chat to you.
okay, yes.
I can have a chat to you, even if I can listen. I'll let's have a conversation.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Sarah, as well, and thank you
Yeah.
for everyone's responses and openness. Actually, I wanted to bring you in as well, just to, I guess you started to sort of unravel bits of your story as well, but to give you the floor to kind of share and summarize your story with IVF.
Yeah, sure. So for those that don't know me, my name is Aisha, and I'm a culture manager within what's known as F&D right now, and I'm also the chair of the Ethnic Diversity Network. And I guess I was going to bring something different to the mix of cultural pressure. So I'll give sort of context to my story. So I got married at 24, and according to the Asian culture, that in a way sometimes seen young and sometimes seen old, but 24 I thought was the right age to get married. And I always had this dream, as I think many people do, of having children, and what they're going to look like. So for me, it was like that was the goal, that I want to get married, and by 30 I would like to have X amount of kids and be settled in my family, etc., etc. So I got married at 24, and then straight away, so I moved into my in-laws when I got married, and that's where I really started to feel, I guess, an expectation of when are you having kids. And at that time I had a career, so I was working in Manchester. I moved to Hull, so in my mind it was kind of like I want to enjoy my married life for a little bit with my husband. And then, you know, my mindset has always been is that, you know, from a religious aspect, when kids are going to come, they come as they're a gift from God. So when your time is written, it will happen for you. But from a cultural perspective, it was just, I felt this pressure, like, and it started to get more and more. And I think after sort of 6 months into my marriage, I started getting fingers pointed that there must be a problem in your relationship if you're not pregnant by now. And it's not the first time that I heard it. I've heard it with other family. I've heard it with friends where they got married, and some were quite lucky, actually. Just speaking after a while, a friend would say, oh, by the way, I'm due a baby. And when you started to work it back, you'd be thinking, oh, yeah, you only got married like 9-10 months ago. And here I'm in 6 months into my marriage, and now I'm already getting asked, you know, like, why are you not pregnant, sort of thing, you know. And the embarrassing sort of notions that my family might have in their head, you know, that actually, do you guys have a relationship, or what is happening here, or, you know, which is the things that really made me uncomfortable. But yeah, okay, that's fine. So I remember saying to my husband, I think it's time to just go and get checked out. And I struggled with my weight for quite some time, actually, even before I got married. So I always had a feeling my weight might play a problem in whatever could be an issue. And I remember going to the GP and telling the GP, and actually it was a male that I was speaking to, and he actually said to me, like, you need to at least wait a year of trying before you can actually get referred to any sort of support, you know, to a hospital, etc., etc. And I remember walking out of there thinking, well, okay, I've got a year of this now. I'm going to have to hear more of this for a year if I can't explain why things are not happening. And luckily, someone reached out to me that I haven't spoken to for a long time. And she actually came and said, you need to get a second opinion. So if you've got a female GP in your practice, I would recommend that you speak to her, because women understand women. And that's the advice she gave me at that time. And at that time, I was like, okay, yeah, let's do that. So I remember making another appointment, and I managed to speak to a female GP and explain. And I got quite emotional in what I was trying to explain to her, and like the things that I'm going through. And she said to me, do you know what, let's make a referral, but I'm going to make a referral for, you know, for a gynecology, like into the gynecology department, to do some other various testing. And I think what she was trying to say to me was that as a byproduct of those testing, we might get to the point of fertility, and then we can take it from there. So I was like, yeah, I'm happy with that. And actually I got my referral, I think 2.5 months later into that journey. But then that journey took me 4.5 years of being basically a guinea pig, of taking different types of medication. They said that I was insulin resistant. They then said I had polycystic ovary syndrome, which is the reason why I couldn't naturally get pregnant. Then they had to do more testing, more scans. I had to get my I think it was ovarian drilling done, and all sorts of stuff, and dyes put through. It was just, I remember 4 years of just feeling like, am I actually ever going to get a result out of this? And 4 years of literally having to hear from family that what is going on with you guys. And actually, I think it was about a year into my marriage, I moved out of my in-laws altogether, because I had told my husband that I can't do it. I need my own space. I need to be in my own place. I need to get away from the negativity that constantly consumes me, because that is what's consuming me at the moment. So we moved out completely. But my treatment was still being dealt with in Hull, and I was living in Manchester. So now it became like having to travel all the time for all my appointments. And luckily, the organization that I was working for at that time were really, really accommodating, because they knew the journey that I was going on. They supported me fully. So, you know, I owe a lot to them and my managers for helping me, you know, through that journey. But for 4.5 years of going through all sorts of procedures and being poked and prodded and all sorts of things going on. And I remember actually saying to my husband that, actually, can you divorce me? Because I can't give you what you want. And clearly the problem is with me. And we're young in our relationship as well. So I don't want to ever feel like I let you down because I couldn't give you what you wanted. And I remember him saying to me that if the conversation was the other way around, what would you do? Would you leave me? And I said, no. And he said, you have to accept that if our life is written to start as two, and if our life is to live as two, and we die old as two, then that's what we do. And I think to bring it more to life, our marriage was a love marriage. It wasn't an arranged marriage. And I think if it was an arranged marriage, I would have felt the pressure 200-300 times more in that relationship, because I think we already had an understanding and we already knew each other quite well. I think the understanding came, and it was actually the love that was holding us even more closer, that look, if there is a life of no kids, then we accept there is no life. And he said it's probably for you to accept that more than I do, because as long as I've got you, I don't need anything else. And I think those words were really comforting, and it gave me that boost that actually, do you know what? If it doesn't happen, then at least I have my partner with me. But it was then, what do we say to family and how do we explain it? You know, and even to a point, my husband said to me that if it comes to my family, I'll tell them that I'm the problem. And I was like, you can't do that. And he's like, no, if it means that you don't feel the way that you do, he goes, I can take it from my family, and they will just probably get quiet and they won't mention it again. And I was like, that is just so much for someone to take and do. But we finally got to a point where, after trying and trying, NHS offered IVF, and they said, look, you've been through that journey now, and we know now what the issue is. Your polycystic ovary is what's causing it, and you've got funding, etc., so let's go through it. So when they had that conversation, 14 weeks then forward, we started our IVF journey, and not to go into so much of it, but I ended up, the first attempt was a miscarriage 4 weeks in. So I got pregnant and then lost that baby. And then the eggs were frozen from my first batch. So we went through IVF again. And this time then I did get pregnant with twins, but I lost one of them at 5 weeks. And actually now I have a daughter out of that pool that of my pregnancy. And now I have a daughter, Zara, who's 13, and she is perfect in absolutely every way that I could ever imagine a child to be. But it's weird because she senses that there's something missing from her, and she always says that she feels that there's someone missing, and it's a really weird thing for her to say, and she has been saying it for a long time. And then I did mention to her that actually I was pregnant with twins, so there would have been another sibling, but unfortunately that they passed away, so that's through a miscarriage. So it's been a really emotional journey for me, but having a daughter wasn't the only problem. As soon as I found out I was having a daughter, then family was more around, oh, you're not having a son now. So it's a daughter, it's okay. And it was like, for us, it was like everything. We didn't care. My husband was so clear. It doesn't matter. As long as the baby is healthy, that's all we care about. Whether it's a male or female, it does not matter to us. God's blessed us and we're accepting it. And even when we got pregnant, they wanted to do a test that they do for Down syndrome. And they were asking us to do this test. And I said to my husband, you know what, I don't want to do it, because if it means that it might cause a miscarriage from the testing, the intrusive testing that they do, then I don't want it. And I said, actually, it's taken us so long to get here that I will accept what God has gifted us with. So whatever happens, we in it together and we do it. And I remember saying to them, no, I don't want to do it. We're quite happy to go on. And now, yeah, my story is that I have one. I wanted to have more, but it's just things in life just don't work out the way that you want to. But at least I can walk away and say, I have a daughter. And I often talk about my headscarf as well. So my headscarf came on as part of my IVF journey, because I remember having a day where I cried so much to God to say, to give me what the one thing that I want in life is to have someone that can call me my own. I can call them my own. And for me, it was to get closer to faith was that I would wear a headscarf. And then when I found out that I was pregnant, and actually the pregnancy was going quite well, it was the decision that I made. Then Ramadan during that year, my headscarf came on, and I've never took it off. And that's where I found my belonging. My faith is my religion and my faith is so strong to me, because I truly believe that my prayers were answered, in my life. So I hope that kind of gives you a bit of a context from a religious and cultural perspective, that also is the pressure that is felt from others and the society and the family makeup. And actually what I should have done was just try and not listen to anyone and just kind of muster through my journey the way that I did, but just kind of sound them all off. But then I think I'm a lot older and wiser now. But yeah, that's my story.
No, Asha, thank you so much for firstly being so brave, and to everyone on the panel for being so brave and sharing your stories, because it's one that has a lot of emotions for all of you, and I know we're going to hear more from Nina shortly as well. But yeah, just thank you for your bravery first of all. Any other follow-up question, because you touched on a lot of subjects, and it links to one of the questions that Seema's put in the chat about kind of the support system and advice of people around, so not just family but also friends and colleagues. Like, how do we create more of an atmosphere that means that you don't even have to worry about fobbing people off, or kind of putting on a bit of tunnel vision? How can we kind of support each other better for people who are going through pregnancy struggles or going through the IVF process in general, so that actually people going through it actually have more comfort in what they're actually experiencing?
I think everyone's journey is unique to them. And I think I honestly think that if you come from an Asian culture or family, you are always going to feel or hear something. I think my situation was unique, that my in-laws are they're from Pakistan, so they've got a different way of thinking and life, how they went. My mother-in-law's got 7 siblings, so for them it was like 7 children. So for her it was, it's for her to understand why things happen and how they happen doesn't help. But I think if you've got a newer generation of parents, I think they understand more that they could be issues and there's different avenues and routes to go through. I think to support and understand is just respect that situation and respect that person's journey, because it is really difficult. And I think sometimes people forget that if you're not going through it yourself, it's really hard to understand what that person is going through. And I know in aspects of my journey, mentally, I was losing it completely. Like, I was losing myself. I wasn't in the right place. And I think that contributed to why things happened to me as well. But I think people are more in a workplace, I think, is when I found my family. People understood what was going on and stuff. But I think when it comes to family and the dynamic of your family, I think some people would understand and some people just wouldn't. And I think you have to just accept that some won't. And I just took myself out of that situation by moving out completely. It's what I did to help me. But I think we are quite further on anyway. But it's just help listen and understand. And if you don't understand, just being there for someone to listen, I think just makes a difference for someone altogether.
No, I agree. And I think we are in a kind of space where we're generationally, we are moving on in a lot of different aspects. So I think we are becoming more understanding in this kind of generation, and the next one will probably be even more understanding than we are. So I think educational pieces such as this podcast and everything we do in the People Networks, I think also brings a high level of understanding to loads of different issues that people are facing as well. I'm going to bring in Nina in a second. So Leanne and Glenn, keep your hands up because I'll take your questions after. But Nurin, I don't know if you wanted to add anything before we move on to Nina.
Yeah, just a quick question for everyone on the panel, really. So, like, as managers, people leaders, or someone that's reporting into a manager, what kind of support would you want to give someone that's going through this? Or equally, what kind of support would you expect from your manager? Because, you know, it is a health condition and it is something that's taken its toll on some of you, as you have described and shown. So what would you expect as an adjustment, I guess?
From my perspective, it would be knowing that I could have the time to go to the appointments that are needed, the hospital appointments. There's so many appointments, just having that flexibility there without feeling stressed, having to ask or swap a shift or whatever. It's that was really stressful, managing all the appointments and work. So having support from that, for that perspective, would be really good.
I think I'd just add kind of similar to what I said earlier, which is it's different for every person. You know, for some people it's time. For some people, you know, they might struggle financially, and pointing them at sources to kind of help deal with that is helpful. For other people, it's kind of mental well-being support. For other, you know, every situation is different, and trying to kind of you know, understand that relationship, know what that person's going through, know what's going to be helpful to them. I guess importantly, know what's not going to be helpful to them, and kind of, you know, reading every situation based on the merits of that situation. I think there's no sort of generic answer here that you know everyone needs every time. You know, every situation is very different, and sort of being close to the person, being close to the individual, understanding what it is that they're going through and what's going to be helpful for them would be my top tip to any people leader that has got someone in their team that's going through this.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, Nina, I wanted to give you the mic to kind of share a bit more about your story, and then we'll move swiftly on after that to questions from the audience.
Thank you. So my story started about 2008. Had endometriosis, had an operation to resolve that. We went away, tried again for a couple of years, nothing happened. Went for tests and it was all just unexplained infertility, which is really frustrating because I'm a fixer, I'm a doer, and I just couldn't do anything in this scenario. So we embarked on our first round of IVF, and from that we had 3 embryos. The first embryo didn't work, the second one didn't work, and the third one did, and that resulted in my daughter Orla being born. But during all this time, touching on like the cultural pressures, my mum's Indian, and it was like I couldn't talk to her about it. She was getting a bit bristly about it, and you know, I think it's just the unknown. Like I hadn't really experienced it or heard about it, but it was almost like please don't talk about it within the family. It was almost like if it's your problem, it's your problem. Don't go telling everyone about your medical condition. And that just made me feel more stressed because I didn't have that support at home with my family. My husband was brilliant, my in-laws were brilliant, and my siblings were great. But that just sort of put added pressure on me, which I don't think I was in the right mindset for the first couple of rounds. But with the round that was successful, I felt I'd done a lot of meditation, a lot of self-care. I was eating really well, just like, I know it sounds quite textbook, but just really adopting some of those principles just to assure myself that I'd given myself the best chance by being in the right headspace. And then a couple of years later, my husband wanted to try again. And I must admit, I just couldn't put myself through another round of IVF. But he asked me to, and we did, and we had to pay for this next round. And I was a bit older, I was 37, and my egg quality wasn't very good. And then they implanted 2 embryos, and I completely freaked out, thinking I'm not ready for twins. Like, I just wanted one more. And unfortunately, that cycle didn't work. And then the following month, we fell pregnant naturally. And I think it was just after that cycle didn't work, I think my body, my brain was just like, that's it. I'm never going to have to go through that grueling process again. Like, we've got all, and we might think about adoption and then falling pregnant. But apparently it's quite common with all like the drugs and hormones, and actually your mindset again, just, taking the pressure off yourself. So yeah, quite a journey really. The cultural thing, still affects me now. I still feel quite emotional. I've still got a really good relationship with my mum. I think it's just she didn't understand about the process, and it was almost like that keeping up appearances type thing. But yeah, it was grueling, and I think I really struggled with what to tell my manager at the time when I was working at a different company. The first time I told her, and a couple of other people knew. And then when the cycle failed, I really struggled with people asking me, how did it go, and the hope in their eyes, and then having to say, oh, well, it wasn't successful. Like, I really struggled with that. And then when we had subsequent cycles, I decided I didn't want to tell anyone. I told close family, but I didn't necessarily want to tell everyone at work. And I just used annual leave for appointments and for having like a couple of days off after the embryo transplant. But that's just me. I know everyone approaches things differently, but that was how I wanted to deal with things. I'm really squeamish. I couldn't do the injections. My husband had to do all of the injections. Like, the nurses tried to teach me how to do it. I just couldn't do it. That was just a really big stumbling block for me. And my husband was like, well, I'll just have to do it. Like, it's not a problem. And I think he felt in some way that was his contribution to like helping with the cycle as well as the emotional support.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing, Nina. Yeah, and again, thank you all, because I think whilst it's like heart kind of stretching hearing like the different experiences everyone has, I'm glad that we've had those different views from James, Aisha, and Nina to kind of just see the different angles and the different things that can all come into effect, because it's not a linear process at all from anyone's end. And I think that's why I wanted Nina, your story to come at the end, because it's like you went through the whole process and then ended up coming back to the natural side of things anyway, which is like a bit full circle in that aspect. So thank you all for sharing. I know, Glenn, you initially had your hand up. I don't know if it's still there. If not, then I can go to Leanne first in the audience.
Afternoon all. It's not so much a question, it's more of a comment really, just touching upon everyone's journey and how different they are. I think going on to what Seema has asked about advice is really realizing that everyone's journey is different. For me, I feel quite guilty in saying this, but we had one round of IVF and was successful straight away. So I feel the guilt of sitting here on this call and it worked straight away for me. And then knowing that the next one might be the same again, might not be. But the advice I would say is just understand that everyone's journey is different, and don't give the whole comment of, oh, you've done it now, so you'll get pregnant naturally next time, because it doesn't work for everybody. It's not a linear journey for everyone. It's just crazy is the only way that I can describe it. That the things that women have to put themselves through to have a child compared to what a man has to do is bonkers. But yet I know my partner would do it if he could. And just for me, my journey was an easy one compared to the stories here. Having the support from my team, because I was just open and honest and I've told everyone about my journey. People ask questions and they wonder if that's okay. For me, yes, ask away, because it means that you're building a knowledge of something that no one really knows about unless you go through yourself. So for me, it would be asking that person that you know that's going through fertility troubles is, what can we do to help you? And I'm sure that they will come forward and say, for me, it would be just being there and letting me waffle on like I'm doing now. What don't you want me to say? Because a lot of people will say the wrong thing, trying to say the right thing. And I think that if they have that understanding of what you want and how you would feel from their advice, I think that's just what I wanted to say. Sorry, I'm a bit emotional from everyone's stories. So sorry.
Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, no, your contribution is very much appreciated. Did anyone in the panel have anything just off the back of that?
No, I think it's really good advice. Every situation is different for everybody, so I think it's absolutely spot on.
Thank you, James. One of the questions I wanted to circle back to was quite early on from Joanne. I know you all kind of touched on it in different aspects. I don't know if you wanted to add to it, but it's the general support through the IVF journey. So whether, I know, James, for example, you mentioned like from a work and professional perspective, but then, everyone's mentioned it's family and friends, or obviously your partner. So is there anything extra in terms of support that you guys have had that could be beneficial for others to hear of, or just the general people around you? I can start with you again, James. The question was directed to you.
No, I don't think there's anything additional I'd share. I think we've covered the main things. I think hopefully I've said this 2 or 3 times, and I think Leanne really just reinforced it. It is different for everybody. The support that I needed is different to the support the next person needs, or will be different to the next person after that. So just be empathetic, read every situation based on what that individual is going through and what they may or may not need, and respond accordingly. And it's not a one size fits all. So that, for me, that's the key point to take away.
I think I would just add, if I think about my journey, like the IVF unit that was supporting me with my treatment, if I didn't understand anything, they took their time to help me understand and gave me the time. And if I felt like I wasn't ready, they allowed me that time to think and maybe come back, maybe tomorrow or whatever. So I think if anyone is going through this journey or is about to, use those professionals to really help you understand maybe things that you might not understand, because actually you'll be pleasantly surprised that actually it isn't a race to get through everything on a specific time. It's how you're feeling yourself, and if emotionally you don't feel you're there, or mentally you think you need more time to process it, then utilize the professionals to help you with that as well. I would start that.
Thank you for sharing. And then second question from the audience, from Sarah. So are there any financial resources that are accessible for IVF specifically to any of them?
In terms of actual financial support, I think the short answer is no. But naturally there are, through like the EAP, there's sort of resources they can direct you to on kind of financial advice. If you have got into debt problems as a result of fertility treatment, or if you need sort of help and advice on budgeting or how to save up for treatments and that kind of thing. So there are resources that can help in terms of budgeting and financials. But in terms of actually providing money to go through treatment, as far as I'm aware, there are kind of no sources of that available.
Thank you, James.
I've just got a question, so I'm just going to step in if that's okay, Stephen. Nina, I get this one. I'm just going to ask you this question, and it might have been one that we should have asked before, but for anyone who doesn't know the process of IVF, would you mind just describing that? I know you mentioned the injections, but anything else that's sort of like, because there might be people on the call that don't know. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah, do you know what? I've actually blotted a lot of that out of my mind, which sounds awful, but so yeah, there's internal examinations, which, I mean, the first one was awful, but you sort of get used to it. It's a strange thing to say. Lots of internal examinations, the injections, the scans, the support that they provide is brilliant. But for me, all I can think about when I reflect back is the needles and the injections, going back for various scans. The actual embryo transplant, they gave me a sedative, I think, so it just made me quite drowsy whilst they put the embryo back in. And as you know, everyone's different what they do afterwards. I wanted to lay really still. I didn't want to move for like however long. They say go for a wee afterwards. I'm like, I don't want to go for a wee because in my head this embryo is going to fall out. So coming around from the sedative as well, you're just feeling groggy, the embryo transfer. And then the wait, like that 2-week wait is awful. And it, every day you go into the toilet thinking, is there blood? Is there, like, oh, I've survived another day, brilliant. Like, what am I going to do mentally to keep myself distracted to get through this day? And then that's another day done. Then I've only got 12 days left. And it's that process. And, you're willing yourself to get to 2 weeks to then have that pregnancy test. And unfortunately, a couple of times I didn't have that. I had bleeding, and you just know, but you still have to go to the hospital for them to do the proper pregnancy test, even though you might have done one at home, for them to give you the official results.
The other thing probably worth adding is IVF is a slightly misused term, right? Because it's a bit of an umbrella term for lots of different procedures, and there are, because. Actually, the one bit of the story I didn't add in mind was Gemma actually spent 12 years working as a nurse in a fertility clinic. So she understands sort of very well from both being a patient but also being the healthcare provider, kind of what the ups and downs are in that process. And there's lots of different procedures. I mean, the main ones are there's one called IUI, which is intrauterine insemination. So that's essentially where the sperm is taken out of the man and put back into the woman. They sometimes prepare the sperm, put it in like an extra solution to sort of help it kind of reach its destination, but the egg never leaves the woman's body. The sperm just goes in a different way. IVF is the one that most often gets talked about. That stands for in vitro fertilization. That's where they take the egg out of the woman and the sperm out of the man, put them next to each other in a lab, and the sperm kind of naturally goes into the egg, and then they transplant the embryo back into the woman. There's another one called ICSI, which stands for, I can't remember that one, so I just googled it, so I remembered it, intracytoplasmic sperm injection, which is where essentially the same as IVF, but rather than let the sperm go naturally into the egg, the sperm is injected into the egg. There's pros and cons of that procedure versus IVF. And then there's another one called PICSI, which is like ICSI, but they sort of chemically treat the sperm first to sort of try and filter out the stronger sperm versus the weaker sperm. So we often just talk about IVF, but actually it's a bit of an umbrella term for lots of different procedures that can help with fertility. Some of them relatively non-invasive and straightforward, and some of them very invasive and quite complex. So it's I think the description Nina's given is a great description of the process and the procedure you went through. But actually, there's a whole basket of different procedures that different people go through depending on what it is that's trying to be treated.
Thank you so much, James. And Nina.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you both for sharing and running through the process. I also wanted to add a comment from Leanne, who's recommended TV documentary, Alex Jones Making Babies, and potentially some others that are linked to that as well. So and that benefited her in a way that her parents can actually watch it to understand the process that she was going through. So again, I'm sure if people wanted to contact the panelists for any other resources that they've used that have been helpful as well, I'm sure that they'd be happy to provide that also. We are coming slowly towards the end of our podcast, so I wanted to open up the floor finally for any questions from the audience initially, but we'll ask the audience either put their hand up or put another question in the chat. I'll circle around to the panelists for just any final thoughts on their stories. So I'll start with James, yourself, just to round up.
No, I've got nothing to add. I think we've had a really good conversation. Echo the thanks for everyone else for sharing their stories. It's not easy sometimes to talk about some of this, and hopefully it's helped some of the people that are listening. And if anyone does have any questions they haven't got to, I'm certainly happy for anyone to reach out. I'm sure the others would be as well. But yeah, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to talk through.
James and Nina.
Exactly what James said. If anyone's got any queries, please reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to people offline.
Yeah, hi, Shoa.
Yeah, same. I've actually popped it in the chat. It is a very emotional journey for a lot of people. So yeah, I think we've got a small network here now. We can speak to. So yeah, the offer's there. Please reach out if anyone wants to chat.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Nurin, as well, for supporting with the hosting and the questions and dealing with the technical issues. But yeah, that's been another Tackling Taboos episode. Thank you, everyone, for lending us your ears. For those who are going to be watching the recording back. And yeah, please have a good rest of the day.
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.